Five Nights at Freddy's, the small indie horror game that took the world by storm when it first released. That game has now turned 10 years old, but if you're watching this video, you probably already knew that. So instead, I'm going to focus on one of the fan games that was created in light of the original games, and that being Five Nights at Candy's. While it didn't blow up in the same way, these games still had a huge impact on the community when they first came out. So today, I want to take a look back at the 3 original Five Nights at Candy's games and see if they truly lived up to the hype around them from back then. This will be my first playthrough of all 3 games, and with this being a challenge run channel, I will be beating all 3 max modes, with a special note on the 3rd game, but I'll get to that later. But without wasting any more time, let's get into it. First up on the list is the one that started it all, Five Nights at Candy's. During the first night, we find out a little bit of the story from the junior manager, who also acts as the phone guy of this game. We also find out from him that this takes place soon after the closure of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I want to say that that's the second FNAC game, but I'm not 100% positive. The rest of the phone call is a basic tutorial on how to play the game. Boiled down, it tells you the longer you have a door closed, the more power it uses, and that the office has 2 doors on both sides and a single window in front of us. It's also revealed that our office is the main informational area of the restaurant. That fact doesn't automatically change much about the game, but it adds some nice lore elements to explain why the animatronics are approaching the office to begin with. And as you would expect, this night only has 2 animatronics, which are Candy and Cindy. They're pretty much the main 2 animatronics that run this establishment. And I don't think I need to say this, but night 1 was pretty easy. During the night 2 phone call, we're informed that the animatronics move on their own. Yeah, Mr. Junior Manager kind of figured that one out. He does also explain that the animatronics have a few glitches in their system. Normally when the animatronics see violence, they're programmed to find the cause of said violence. However, with these glitches, the animatronics have no problem seeing kids be violent with one another in the case of cops and robbers. But it also manifests in a way to where they show an extreme distrust in any adult visitor, more times than not just blankly staring at them. It's also mentioned that there was an accident about a month ago where one of the animatronics acted out and traumatized their systems. The animatronic in question is being held in one of the back rooms awaiting replacement. During the actual night, it's much the same. The only main difference is there's one more animatronic during this night, Chester. He acts the exact same as Candy and Cindy, just on the other side of the restaurant. All 3 animatronics have their own path and will slowly progress down those paths to your door. This night serves more as a way of getting you accustomed to the gameplay loop. Moving on to night 3, we learn from Mr. Junior Manager that the last night guard got fired. Presumably the darkness got to him and he got a little stir crazy and took it out on one of the animatronics. This animatronic is named Blank because kids can draw on him with crayons and markers and stuff like that, and he's the next new threat of the game. It's also noted that Blank is acting strangely, since the beating, obviously. Instead of getting into the office through the normal way, the doors, he tries to instead break his way through the window. So throughout the night, we have to keep checking on him, and if he moves, close the window until he hits it and then resets. For this night, 2 animatronics are added. One being Blank, and the other being the aforementioned animatronic awaiting replacement from the night 2 phone call. That animatronic's name is Old Candy, and it doesn't have eyes. Which is quite important to this game, because there's a mechanic I haven't explained yet. The main animatronics have glowing eyes, so whenever they show up at your door, you can just see them, and you don't have to check the camera to know if they're there or not. However, the fact that Old Candy doesn't have eyes really throws a wrench into that gameplay loop. There's a chance he'll be standing at your left door, and you would have no idea because you can't see him. Thankfully at this point I got used to checking the cameras anyways, so it wasn't an issue. Going into night 4, we find out that the security guard that got fired is actually missing. The restaurant had gotten a call from the police stating they couldn't find him. Come to think of it, it would be weird to attack a random animatronic if you were scared of the dark. Oh well, probably nothing. This night only adds 1 new character, a penguin. I will not speak about this penguin. That's mainly because I didn't even know what he did until way later on, so I'll speak about him then. I thought he would just kill you. Turns out he's way more annoying than that. And apart from his addition, it's just night 3, but they move a little quicker. For night 5, we only learn 1 new thing during the phone call, and that is that there is a room in the restaurant that is not labeled on the cameras. And that is done on purpose because there is literally nothing in that room. Nothing at all. Literally nothing to be worried about. Yeah, it's another animatronic. Also, there's a jumbled up message at the end of the phone call. I couldn't understand it, and I had to literally look up a translation. And it is, Ye shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. Neither shall thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. To my knowledge, this is never explained. Anyways, the new animatronic is Rat. Yes, that is his name. Rat. Anyways, he functions a lot like old Candy. But while Candy can only go to the left door, Rat can go to both. And while he does prioritize the right, there were a few times he showed up on the left. Also, needless to say, apart from his addition, the night is literally just the previous night, but faster. At this point in the game, I really didn't notice too much difficulty. The game's not easy by any means, but as long as you're on top of stuff, things won't get pulled up from under you. On the 6th night, the phone guy just tells us we're not meant to be there. While he does compliment us for doing a good work, he does implore us to take a break tomorrow. Needless to say, we are not going to take a break tomorrow. And as for the night, it's faster night 5. Also, Rat wasn't super prominent during night 5, but acts more like a normal animatronic during this one. So you'll definitely be seeing his face more often. As long as you're on the cameras and check outside both doors and keep an eye on Blink, you should be golden. The timings on when an animatronic is going to attack are very lenient, and unless you just stare at them in the face, you're gonna survive. The same cannot be said about night 7 though. 720 mode. Needless to say, this is not going to be a cakewalk, and as a side note, I didn't want to look up any guides for this challenge. I'm gonna be here for a while. While playing through the night over the course of a couple hours, I found that the moment you saw an animatronic in an attacking stage, you had to deal with them. So let's say there's an animatronic outside your right door. If you either opened the cameras before closing the door or closed the left door before the right, you were dead. It was like the moment you looked away from an attacking animatronic, you had sealed your fate. Another thing that popped up was power usage. If I'd played this night like I had played the past nights and left the door closed until I was absolutely sure that an animatronic had left, I was going to run out of power. Thankfully, I found out pretty early on that every animatronic has a set time before they leave once you close the door on them. So if you can get that timing down in your head and are able to keep track of which doors are closed and which ones aren't, it's not too bad. That's where the penguin comes to play. I didn't want to explain him earlier because I wanted to explain him now. There was only one attempt that I had that he was actually able to get into my office, and he just sat on my desk. He just sat there staring at me, then started opening and closing doors. His gimmick is that every once in a while, he'll open or close a random door. This ended up getting me killed because the door that I just shut got opened back up and I died. Anyways, going forward with this night, it got a lot easier. It boiled down to the moment I saw an animatronic, I had to deal with it and then move on to the others. As long as I hadn't looked at one, I had a good amount of time left before actually dying. Granted, this is 720 mode, and by a good amount of time, I mean like 3 seconds. While it wasn't easy, and after many failed attempts, I finally got a win by the skin of my teeth. Just before the clock hit 6 AM, my power went out. So while I was sitting in my room with flashing lights, expecting to die, I finally completed it. Overall, I think this game did live up to the hype that I saw with it back in the day, and I'd even go out of my way to say that this game holds up pretty well even by today's standards. A solid 8 out of 10. The same cannot be said about Five Nights at Candy's 2. And as you will see later, I felt like this one was a complete downgrade compared to the first. Starting off, there's no phone calls. Instead of some interesting way of portraying the mechanics of the game, you're tossed in and given a wall of text on your screen. Pretty much the gist of the game is you can flash a light in front of you to see if there's any animatronics, and you can pull up a camera panel. This camera panel shows 6 different cameras across the building, with each camera having a corresponding phone. When an animatronic is in front of you, you need to go into the cameras and activate one of the phones and wait for the animatronic to leave. And that is it. Also, for the first night, only Cindy is active. One basic mechanic with one basic animatronic and an 8-minute night. If you couldn't tell, I'm not a fan. At the end of the night, we are showed the first of several minigames. Also, I forgot to mention, but in the first game, between the nights there were short videos, but I couldn't really put together what they were trying to convey, so I didn't include them. Honestly, skill issue on my part. Anyways, this one we play as Chester, and we have to walk around the restaurant from the first game to find a key to unlock a door. We know that this door is the one Rat is behind in the first game, and that's it. You unlock the door, and the minigame immediately ends. In night 2, the game really starts to shake things up, and by that I mean there's one other animatronic. This one being Chester. Chester will randomly appear on one of the 6 cameras, banging on a vent in that room. Once you find him, all you need to do is ring the phone until he runs away. Also, one thing that I learned during this night is that you can turn off the phones. This was mainly because I didn't read the wall of text, and that's completely on me. I thought that you just had to leave the phone on until the animatronic went in, and then it shut itself off and had a cooldown. But no, that cooldown is a punishment, not a normal game mechanic. Again, that one's on me. What's not on me is how weird the next nightly minigame is. Oh, and yes, I am glancing over the rest of this night too, because it's the same thing, you just gotta check for Chester. In this minigame, we play as the Penguin, and we are tasked with finding 3 pieces of Chester, which is apparently now dead and scattered around the restaurant, and bring each piece back to the box at the start. I guess we can infer that at the end of the first minigame, he dies, and during this one we pick up the pieces. I'm not fully sure how that relates to this game, but Chester is back in partially functioning order, so I guess not much. Moving on to night 3, we're introduced to 2 new faces, and that is Candy and the Penguin, I think. Truth be told, the Penguin just starts appearing around this point in the game. I can't remember exactly what night it was, and his mechanic is that he'll show up on one of the cameras, and if you don't close the panel or switch the cameras fast enough, he will disable them until you reset it. However, you're given more than enough time to get off the camera, and the reset process is like 2 seconds long. It's like a rock on a trail ahead of you that you can see. If you still manage to trip on it, that's on you. I'm mainly bringing this up because later in this game, instead of it being a rock on a trail, it's like a rock thrown at you from the bushes. And as for Candy, he is essentially Cindy 2.0. He'll randomly appear in front of you, and you just need to go into the cameras, call one of the phones, and you're good. The only slight hiccup is that you can't have him and Cindy in the same room at the same time. So if you call a room that Cindy's in, you have to turn off that phone, go to another camera, and call that phone instead. It's not too bad right now, but it does become a major issue later on, as I'll explain later when it comes up. As for now, night 3 is still an 8-minute slog, but it's starting to pick up. As for the minigame for this night, we play as Blank. We are tasked with walking around and finding 5 children's drawings on the ground. Out of all of them, only one is interesting, and that is a kid asking where Chester is. We can assume at this point that Chester is completely decommissioned and no longer a part of the restaurant. Again, at some point he gets put back together, but I guess we don't get to see that. And I have literally nothing to say about night 4. It is literally night 3, but again, even the minigame, you have to replace Candy's tie with one you find in the office, and the moment you give it back to him, it ends. Not much I can say about this night, apart from it was pretty boring. During night 5, we're finally introduced to the final character, Blank. I don't know why he wasn't introduced in night 4 when his minigame was after night 3, but who knows. Anyways, Blank is Cindy 3.0. It's the same thing really. If he's standing in front of you, you go into the cameras, you choose a camera that doesn't have Cindy or Candy in it, and you call that phone. As for the night itself, it is starting to ramp up in difficulty, but that being said, I expected this level of difficulty around night 3 and not night 5. As for the minigame during this night, I feel like they were kind of running out of ideas because this one just gets silly. We play as Candy, and we're just told to search. After wandering around a bit, we find that the door that leads to Rat's room is open, and upon getting close to it, it shuts. And I kid you not, but 3 officers come in and attack you. One of them is way too happy to be involved and run towards you with what I can only assume is a taser, and it ends. Nothing more is said or done. Night 6 finally, truly shakes up the gameplay, and it's probably my favorite night of the game. Instead of the 5 normal animatronics, there's only 2, Rat and Cat. These are the only 2 animatronics that you have to deal with. Cat is like Chester and Cindy mixed together, overall moving pretty quickly and will occasionally bang on vents. Rat is a mix of Candy and the Penguin. He moves pretty quickly and will occasionally stare into the camera and give the same effect that Penguin does, i.e. shutting off your cameras and having you reboot them. And there is one main mechanic that makes all of this blend really well together. Both Rat and Cat can be on the same camera at once. That means even if one of them is on that camera and you call it to get one out from in front of you, they'll go to the same room. In the main 5 nights, each animatronic had to have its own individual camera. So instead of needing to flip through and find which one's available, you can just sit on one of them and call it when you need to. The only thing that would ever move you off that camera is Cat banging on one of the vents. And as for the minigame after this night, it's also more interesting. This one, you play as Blank. This time, before he got busted up in the first game. and you just have to collect 5 more pictures, with the last one leading to a shadow candy thing that screams at you. Weird, but okay. Then you become Old Candy. At this point, the shadow candy entity leads you to the office where there is a crying child. Your presence makes this kid happy and he runs back to his dad. However, you find that his dad is scolding him, and this causes Old Candy to freak out and attack the dad. It's a nice showing as to why Old Candy needed to be repaired in the first game and why the other animatronics had a distrust for adults. It's not much and it's something we already knew, but it was nice to see it play out. Now onto 720 mode, even though this mode only has the original 5 animatronics in it. You know that one metaphor I mentioned earlier about the rock being thrown at you from the bushes? That's Penguin during this night. Penguin is one of 2 reasons I genuinely hated attempting this night, because he can pop up at any time, whenever you choose any camera, and if you're not fast enough, you have to reset. Granted, that reset is only a couple seconds long, but if there's an animatronic in front of you when you have to reset, you are dead. There's no way about it, you will die. And as for the second thing that makes this guy so ungodly annoying to do is the fact that animatronics in adjacent rooms have priority over a phone call compared to the animatronics standing right in front of you. Let me explain. Let's say Blank is in front of you. Obviously, you need to call a room to get him to get away from you. So you call cam 15. You wait for the connection lost reconnecting screen to show up, and you end the call and leave the cameras only for Blank to still be in front of you. You open the cameras again, and to your absolute horror, Cindy was in an adjacent room and answered the call instead of Blank. You try to remedy the situation by calling a different room, but at this point, you're already dead. It was these 2 factors, granted I did find a strategy to get around the Penguin, that was almost my breaking point for this game. I almost gave up trying to complete this night because I hated it so much. It felt like an RNG hellfest that I was getting my face beat in at. Regardless, I was stubborn and persistent, and eventually did beat the night once again by the skin of my teeth. Candy was standing in front of me, and while trying to look for a camera to call them away, Penguin disabled them. So I set down my camera, flashed one more time, and accepted my death. But by some divine intervention, the clock hit 6 AM before I got jump scared. I genuinely have no idea how I survived that, but I'm not gonna question it, nor am I gonna try that mode again. Overall, my thoughts on this game are bad. It's just a downgrade from the first one. A solid 5 out of 10, with 3 of those points going to Night 6 alone, because I did genuinely love that one. While I don't fully remember the release of this game back then, I think this might be why. After that travesty of a sequel, we now go into Five Nights at Candy's 3. So each night of this game is quite complicated, so I'm going to try my best to lay it out for you. In the very beginning of the game, we are shown that we play as a little girl who is suffering from nightmares of Rat and Cat. We are unsure of why she's having these nightmares, we just know that she is and we need to survive them. That is when we are thrown into the pre-night minigame. Essentially, this is a dreamlike world where an origami paper cat gives us the rundown on what to expect in the upcoming night. Essentially an info dump from the second game, just laid out a lot better. Also during these sections we can go into what's known as the dreamscape, and we can find tidbits of lore deep inside our minds. Pretty interesting overall in terms of storytelling. On to our first night. We're in a bedroom with a closet to our right, a cabinet in front of us, and a door to our left. Rat, the only enemy in this night, can randomly appear in any of these 3. I mainly say randomly because if you're looking at the closet and hear him scuttle, and then look away and then back at the closet, he can be there. It's kind of weird because you would think that if he was there and he made a noise, he'd be at one of the other 2, but it adds a nice bit of randomness to the night, so no complaints here. Another mechanic in this night is a cassette player. According to Origami Cat, our dad gave us this cassette player to play when we had nightmares as a kid to help us sleep. Well, you don't have to sleep in this game, you do have to survive from 12 to 6 AM. And while that tape is playing, the night will progress twice as fast. But there is a catch. Sometimes you need to rewind the tape because it is still a cassette. Also, this is the first Candy's game that I found genuinely scary. When Rat attacks, you need to keep your light on his face, but he dodges it. So you have to follow his face around. After that, your light will flicker and he crawls under your bed. You then need to look under your bed to find out which side he's on and then look on the opposite side coming back up. So if you look under and he's on the right side, you have to come back up and look to your left. When you do that, after a tiny bit, there will be a very, very quiet creak, which indicates you need to look back over to the right and shine your light in his face. If done correctly, he will run away and be dealt with. Continue doing this and keeping the cassette on and you'll finish off the night. I don't know what it is about about this game, but I think the fact that everything is shrouded in darkness apart from your mouse makes it so tense. It's not like scary in the sense that I don't want to play, but it's scary in the sense that I'm scared of what I'm going to see when I move my mouse. Overall, pretty good start. That then takes us into our first post-night minigame. Told you it was getting complicated. And in this, we're playing as a little girl that we played in the main game, and we have to explore around Rat and Cat's diner. I think that's what it's called. At the end of this one, we have to play a game of hide and seek with Rat, but no matter where we hide, he will find us. And with that, it's on to night 2. In the pre-night minigame, Origami Cat praises you for getting through the first night. It then mentions that in this next night, they are going to be stronger, them being Rat. Also, if we flash him enough times before he's able to attack, he will start to mimic knocking sounds. Each time he knocks, he's going to be on the opposite side of where that sound was. Pretty much if you hear knocking on the left side, look to the right side as fast as you can to hopefully flash him before he's able to get out and do the aim training thing. Not much can really be said about the dreamscape though. During the second night of the game, all is going well. The only thing out of the ordinary is that at some point the tape player started to sound very jumbled. This happened while Rat was attacking, and I didn't think much of it, so while he was under the bed, I looked at the tape player, and I looked back. Yeah, should have seen that one coming. My first death in this game, and it's literally because I looked away from him. Great. Anyways, I ended up beating the night on my second try. While the game's still decently easy, it's definitely starting to ramp up in difficulty, mainly with Rat becoming more aggressive. This post-night minigame is much like the last one, except this time, instead of playing hide and seek with Rat, we play with Cat. And in the end, no matter where we hide, we get caught once again. Going into the pre-night minigame, we're immediately informed that Rat has joined the party. As for the dreamscape, not much is said apart from some tidbits of lore that we already knew. That being that Rat and Cat have their own diner and that there's coffee available for adults. Apart from that, we don't really learn too much. Going into the main night, and Cat is more of a nuisance than an actual threat. He will slowly sneak up on either side of the bed, making a quite hissing noise that slowly gets louder as he progresses. And the way that we get rid of them is you shine your light on them. Do that until he goes away, and then you're safe to continue to deal with Rat. And as for Rat, he's pretty much the same as usual, just a little faster. Also, I felt like from this point forward, the cassette tape didn't last as long. That's probably just me getting used to the length rather than it actually getting shorter. And that can absolutely be taken out of context. Regardless, the tape also gets more jumbled up more often from this point forward. Kinda surprisingly, I beat this night on my first try. Considering I died on night 2 and it was only Rat, I'll take the win. As for the post-night section, we meet a new character, the Puppeteer. He has a puppet named Vinny, and as of right now, that's all we know about him. Unfortunately, while the story of this game is quite good, it's so slow going. Also, at the end, once again, we play hide and seek with Rat and get caught. The only interesting part about the pre-night section to night 4 is that we get a brief mention about a movie coming out named Psychopath. It's mentioned in the newspaper clip that the actor for it was perfect for the position. Not sure how this relates to the story just yet, but I'm sure we'll find out. During the main night, Rat and Cat are fast. Not really too much to say beyond that, because at this point, going forward, the gameplay doesn't change very much. Except for this one point in the night when Cat was under my bed and I did not hear him at all get out from under it, and I got jump scared. And yes, it did scare me. Also, I somehow beat the night while fighting for my life, so that's cool. The next post-night section isn't much to write home about. The only semi-interesting thing is that you play hide and seek with Cat and he doesn't remember you, but in the end he still finds you regardless. Going on to pre-night game number 5, Origami Cat says that this will most likely be the last night that we have to deal with these nightmares, and that going into the dreamscape is a bad idea. However, there was something interesting to be found in there. It's a newspaper clipping stating that the actors for Rat and Cat were found dead. It stated that they had fought one another, and while one suffocated to death, the other fell and hit the back of their neck on a nearby table. It's also noted that both their bodies were found by the Puppeteer. Interesting. As for the main night, it's quite literally night 4, but again, literally the only real difference between night 4 and night 5 is aggression, and even at that, it's a decently minimal increase. I don't know if I had just gotten used to the game at this point, but I had no issues with this night. Yeah, you know what? I was probably getting too comfortable with the game, and I ended up dying. Apart from that humbling experience, it went alright. It's during the post-night minigame that things really start to get interesting. We find out that this is the day of the show that is going to reveal the names of Rat and Cat. I didn't mention this before, but it's been kind of hyped up throughout the last couple days and is a big deal. While we do end up playing hide and seek again, this time it's a little different. Rat decides to play hide and seek with all the children at once. While looking for a hiding spot, we find that the employees only room is now open. The past few days it's been shut, so we end up going in and hiding in a locker in there. And that's when shit hits the fan. Rat walks in knowing that we're hiding in there and tries to find us. He is then confronted by the puppeteer about being drunk and they get into an altercation. One thing leads to another and they attack each other, and the puppeteer pushes Cat away, causing him to hit his head and die. When the puppeteer is freaking out about this and doesn't know what to do because he just killed a man, Cat walks in. Cat decides that the only reasonable thing is to call the police. The puppeteer, not wanting to be blamed for murder, decides to strangle Cat. It's at this point he makes up a story about how they were fighting and he had just found them dead and called the police. He also takes a plaque off the wall indicating he's most likely the actor from the Psychopath movie from earlier. It's at this point that the minigame ends. It's revealed to us that this is the reason Mary is having the nightmares to begin with. It's also revealed in a post-night cutscene that Mary explains all of this to her therapist and ends up getting the puppeteer caught for his crimes. That then leads into the final night. It's revealed in a pre-night cutscene that the puppeteer is not done with us. He states that he is remorseful and he wasn't content with himself after realizing what he had done. He also mentions that it would have been different if we weren't there and that he had everything. We took that away from him and now he wants revenge. Now onto the main night itself, and this one changes up everything. Mostly. We still have our cassette player that speeds up the night and will eventually run out and need to be rewound. But now instead of Rat and Cat, we have Vinny. And Vinny does not mess around. He can still be scared away if we flash him while he's at one of the doors. But when he attacks, all the past rules are off the table. For starters, he is fast. Like, really, really fast. Also, I'm not sure if you can tell, but he doesn't have 3 fixed locations like Rat. Instead, he has a few more, needless to say. Not only that, I'm sure you can notice he doesn't stay in 1/3 of the room. Instead, he will skip to whatever side he wants, whenever he wants, while attacking you. And if you don't keep your light on him, he's gonna let you know, and you are going to die. As you can expect, I sucked at this night. It was not easy, and it felt like I had to completely relearn the game just to deal with this one threat. On top of that, you can probably tell by my gameplay, my reaction time is not the best, and my mouse is moving decently slow. Not only did I have to get better with my reaction time, but I ended up turning up the DPI on my mouse just to get to his head fast enough. After fully learning how to deal with him in his initial attack phase, he acts just like Cat and will hide under your bed. After that, it's as simple as looking away, waiting for him to come up, and then looking at him and waiting for him to run off. The one good thing about this night is that you spend so long fighting him that the night seems to go by a little quicker. I know that the night is not shorter, but it feels shorter because you're constantly defending yourself. After a good dozen or so tries, and the entire night of all but holding my breath wishing for the best, I end up beating him. A post-night cutscene also reveals that Mary is at the end of her recovery and all's well that ends well. Also, there's a bit after the night that mentions that we need to find someone. This someone or something is still hiding, and we need to put the pieces together in order to find them. But as of right now, Five Nights at Candy's 4 still isn't out, so I don't know what that means. Now onto the max mode. I say it like that because this game doesn't really have a maximum mode, essentially. The closest thing to that would probably be the Shadow Challenge, but even then it's only a Shadow Rat that is super aggressive, but can be easily dealt with once you understand its timings. Apart from that, there's also 3 modifiers that work across all nights. These 3 modifiers are Laser Pointer, which makes your flashlight smaller, My Wake Up Music, which makes the tape keep you awake and doesn't make the night go faster, and Silent Night with a tape that works, but you can't hear it. I guess the ultimate max mode would be all 3 of these and the Shadow Challenge, but then it's just Rat and not also Cat. I'm not sure, but I was able to beat the normal Shadow Challenge without the modifiers, and I didn't get anything. No star, and no cutscene or anything like that in the end. If there is a demand for it, I do not mind going back to the Shadow Challenge and completing it with all 3 modifiers, but at this point in time, I don't feel like that would be necessary. But regardless, what are my thoughts on this game? I would say that this game is really good. While I thought the gameplay of the first Five Nights at Candy's was definitely better, apart from that, this is the best game in the series by far, an easy 9 out of 10. And with that, we are at the end of the video. If you did enjoy it, liking and subscribing would really help out the channel since my upload schedule is bad at best. Also, if you're still here, YouTube thinks that you'll like this video, so you should click on it and see if they're correct. Have a good night.